So I wanted to go over to Fox for a second. So over at Fox, um, you had what's his name? Darryl Zanuck. Can you describe the difference between Cinerama and CinemaScope? And can you explain how Zanuck pitched CinemaScope to the investors for the movie The Robe?
Yes, Darryl Zanuck was in the 50s the savior of Hollywood. Fox was the studio that saved Hollywood by introducing a new widescreen technology called CinemaScope. Cinerama was a huge three-panel screen, curved, that covered peripheral vision. It was too large a format to tell narrative stories, to tell stories. It wasn't a narrative medium. And so the initial Cinerama films were all travelogues. They
Huh.
weren't story films. It was too big. It was too expensive. It was too cumbersome. You had to redesign a theater with 3 projection booths in the back of the orchestra. So it was very limited in terms of what it could do. CinemaScope was manageable. It widened the width of the screen. And so you had, for the first time, a wider view. And it required a new way of making movies. It really did impose a new kind of aesthetic. Darryl Zanuck and his associate in the East, who ran the money market, Spiros, realized that if Fox was going to survive, they would not only have to take over CinemaScope, but sell it to all the other studios. And they would make the profit because they hold the patent. They held the patent. And they convinced Hollywood to adopt CinemaScope. Fox was married to CinemaScope. Every film in the 50s after 1953 was in scope. The other studios used scope intermittently when a project seemed to demand it. But it was a formula that worked. It could be, theaters could be, you could have CinemaScope in neighborhood theaters without the prohibitive cost and the cumbersomeness of Cinerama. Cinerama, by the way, is gone. It can't be seen in any theater in the world.
I
You
had
have
no
to
idea
take
what
it
it
away.
was until I read about it in your book, honestly.
Really?
I had no idea what it was. I had never heard of the technology
You
before.
never heard of that term?
No,
This is Cinerama.
no.
Okay. Well, and if you want to find out about it, there's no way
I
because it
know.
doesn't exist.
I
You
mean,
can't see
they didn't
Cinerama.
even really have too many pictures of it.
No,
Like when I looked into it, it's like there wasn't even there's not much on it anymore.
no. It's the past. It's a
Yeah.
foreign country. But you can see Cinerama films from a DVD company called Flicker Alley, which gives in a smile box format, they call it. You get the sense of the curvature, and they are available,
Huh.
and they've been beautifully restored. They're worth looking at as a reflection of 1950 sensibility. But you can't see a Cinerama film anywhere. It's gone. CinemaScope was more manageable. It was large, but it wasn't overwhelmingly large, and it was suitable for telling stories, which is Hollywood's bread and butter. So Darryl Zanuck insisting on CinemaScope as the savior of the movie industry turned out to be correct.
Huh.
And The Robe from 1953, that's the film that introduced Cinerama, was the film that literally saved Hollywood. And as I'm doing my screenings from my book in different theaters around the country, I'm happy to say I have not been able to convince one programmer to show The Robe because it's a Christian epic set in the early Christianity. It's a religious film, and they say, "Oh no, people won't come to see it," and they may be right. And from today's perspective, which shows the difference between then and now, how could you choose as your make or break movie? And it was a make or break movie, a biblical epic about early Christians.
Hmm.
That wouldn't play today.
No.
That you would have trouble booking it in any theaters today.
Yeah.
But it played in 1953. It was a box office office sensation. But in the 50s, that period, people went to church and synagogues and temples and mosques. It was a more religious oriented culture. And the culture wasn't afraid of going to see movies about early Christians. They welcomed it. It's a very good film on its own terms, and it is the film that saved the industry in 1953. It was a huge box office sensation.